Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good evening to all of you. I hope you all are fine and doing good, doing great. So let's start today's lesson, inshallah. We are on the page of 88. We are studying the book How to Talk to Anyone. Okay, so 7. How to introduce people like the hostess with the mostest. Okay, so it is important to help newly mates through their first nervous moments. Suzanne, I would like you to meet John Smith. John, this is Suzanne, John. What do you expect John and Suzanne to say? Smith? That's S-M-I-T-H, isn't it? Your girl is Suzanne. Well, now there is an interesting name. There is an interesting name. Nice try, forget it. Don't blame John or Suzanne for being less than scintillating. The fault lies with the person who introduced the two, the way most people introduce their friends to each other, with naked names. They cast out a line with no bait for people to sink their teeth into. Big winners may not talk a lot, but conversation never dies unwillingly in their midst. They make sure of it with techniques like never the naked introduction. When they introduce people, they buy an insurance policy on the conversation with a few simple add-ons. Suzanne, I'd like you to meet John. John has a wonderful boat. We took a trip on last summer. John, this is Suzanne Smith. Suzanne is editor-in-chief of Shoestring Government magazine. Padding the introduction gives Suzanne the opportunity to ask what kind of boat John has or where the group went. It gives John an opening to discuss his love of writing, okay, or of cooking, or of food. The conversation can then naturally expand to travel in general, life on boats, past vacations, favorite recipes, restaurants, budgets, diets, magazine, editorial policy, to infinity. Okay, so technique number 17 is that never the naked introduction. When introducing people, don't throw out an unbaited hook and stand there grinning like a big clam, leaving the newly mates to flutter their fins and fish for a topic. Bait the conversational hook to get them in the swim of things. Then you are free to stay or float on the next to the next networking opportunity. If you are not comfortable mentioning someone's job during the introduction, mention their hobby or even a talent. The other day at a gathering, the hostess introduced a man named Gilbert. She said, "Lael, I'd like you to meet Gilbert. Gilbert's gift is sculpting. He makes beautiful wax carvings." I remember thinking, gift, now that is a lovely way to introduce someone and induce conversation. Armed with these two personality enhancers, 3 conversation igniters, and 3 small extenders, it is time to take a step up the communications ladder. Let us now rise from small talk and seek the path to more meaningful dialogue. The next technique is guaranteed to make the exchange engrossing for your conversation pattern, for your conversation partner. Okay, how to resuscitate a dying conversation. Resuscitate. We have already read this word. Resuscitate. दोबारा जिंदा करना.
resuscitate.
So, दोबारा मतलब एक मरते हुए गुफ्तगू को कैसे दोबारा जिंदा किया जाए, यानी एक दोबारा इह्या कैसे किया जाए. Even a well-mentioned husband who might ask his wife while making love, "Is it good for you too, honey?" knows not to ask a colleague, "Is the conversation good for you too?" Yet he wonders. We all do. With the following technique, set your mind at rest. You can definitely make the conversation hot for anyone with whom you speak. Like my prom date, Donnie, you will miraculously find subjects to engross your listeners. Be a sleuth on their slips of the tongue. Sleuth. What is sleuth? Surag rasa.
Sleuth.
Okay, so jasoos. اوکے ڈیٹیکٹیو. بی اے سلیوتھ, ایک جاسوس بن جائیے ان کے ہونٹوں پر, آف دا ٹنگ, ان زبان پر, زبان کی ہونٹوں کا جاسوس بن جائیے. اوکے سو نو میٹر ہاؤ ایلوسیو دا کلو, شرلاک ہومز از کانفیڈنٹ ہی ول سون بی اسٹیئرنگ رائٹ ایٹ اٹ تھرو ہز میگنیفائنگ گلاس لائک دا unerring detective. Okay, unerring. What does it mean? بے گناہ, بے خطا, یعنی کبھی غلطی کر ہی نہیں سکتا.
Unerring.
So unerring detective, big winners know no matter how elusive the clue, they will find the right topic. How? They become word detectives. I have a young friend, Nancy, who works in a nursing home. Nancy cares deeply about the elderly, but often grumbles about how crotchety and laconic some of her patients are. Crotchety. Okay, let's see this word, crotchety. Badmizaj.
Crotchety. Crotchety. Crotchety.
Crotchety, laconic. مختصر. Okay. Crotchety, بدمزاج. Crotchety, بدمزاج. And laconic, مختصر. Some of her patients are. She laments, وہ مطلب یعنی غمزدہ ہوتی ہے یا اس پر تعزیت کرتی ہے. She laments she has difficulty relating to them. Nancy told me about one especially cantankerous old woman named Mrs. Otis, whom she could never get to open up to her. Okay, so cantankerous. There's so many interesting words. Cantankerous. Deet.
Cantankerous.
Deet. Okay. So cantankerous. So crotchety means badmizaj. Okay, and both crotchety and cantankerous. بدمزاج, both بدمزاج کے معنی میں ڈھیٹ اور بدمزاج. اوکے crotchety and cantankerous. crotchety, cantankerous. اس کو یاد کر لیجیے. just use it with your friends, like how cantankerous and crotchety you are. Yes, good. One day, Nancy confined right after all those rainy storms we had last week. Just to make conversation, I remarked to Mrs. Otis, terrible storms we had last week, don't you think? Well, Nancy continued, Mrs. Otis practically jumped down my throat. She said in a snippy voice, it's been good for the plants. I asked Nancy how she responded to that. What could I say? Nancy answered, the woman was obviously cutting me off. Did you ever think to ask Mrs. Otis if she liked plants? Plants? Nancy asked. Well, yes, I suggested. Mr. Otis brought the subject up. I asked Nancy to do me a favor. Ask her, I begged. Nancy resisted, but I persisted. Nancy resisted, but I persisted. یعنی نینسی نے انکار کیا لیکن میں مصر رہا. Just to quiet me down, Nancy promised to ask cantankerous old Mrs. Otis if she liked plants. The next day, flabbergasted Nancy called me from work. Flabbergasted. What is this? حیرت میں ڈالنا. اوکے سو flabbergasted, حیرت میں ڈالنا. اوکے flabbergasted Nancy called me from work. Lail, how did you know? Not only did Mrs. Otis loves plant, but she told me she had been married to a gardener. Today I had a different problem with Mrs. Otis. I couldn't shut her up. She went on and on about her garden, her husband. So, top communicators know ideas don't come out of nowhere. If Mrs. Otis thought to bring up plants, then she must have some relationships with them. Furthermore, by mentioning the word, it meant subconsciously she wanted to talk about plants. Suppose, for example, instead of responding to Nancy's comment about the rain, with "it's good for the plants," Mrs. Otis had said, "Because of the rain, my dog couldn't go out." Nancy could then ask about her dog. Or suppose she grumbled, "It's bad for my arthritis." Can you guess what old Mrs. Otis wants to talk about now? So when talking with anyone, keep your ears open and, like a good detective, listen for clues. Be on the lookout for unusual references, any anomaly, deviation, digression, or invocation of another place, time, person. Ask about it, because it's the clue to what your conversation partner would really enjoy discussing. So if two people have something in common, when the shared interests come up, they jump on it naturally. For example, if someone mentions playing squash, like bird watching or stamp collecting, and the listener shares the passion, he or she pipes up, "Oh, you are a squasher, or bird, or philatelist too." Here is the trick. There is no need to be a squasher, birder, or philatelist to pipe up with enthusiasm. You can simply be a word detective. When you pick up the reference as though it excites you too, it paralyzes you into conversation. The stranger thrills too. The subject may put your feet to sleep, but that's another story. So technique number 18: be a word detective. Like a good gum show, listen to your conversation partner's every word for clues to his or her preferred topic. The evidence is bound to slip out. Then spring on that subject like a sleuth on to a slip of the tongue, like Sherlock Holmes. You have the clue to the subject that is hot for the other person. Now that you have ignited stimulating conversation, let's explore a technique to keep it hot. Okay, I think that's enough for today, right? Okay, thank you, Jazakallah khair, and thank you for listening to me patiently and coming to watch the video. So that's a very humble request, that you share it with others, with other friends, with other colleagues, with our other classmates, so that we could make a community to, like, those who are having conversation, learning in congregation. Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.